There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So for today's session, we are going to be covering Digital SAT 101, reviewing the diagnostics, SAT Prep 101, and just a brief introduction to SAT strategies just so that you can, get your feet wet a little bit. So hello, I'm Coach Siobhan. I am a success coach. I'm also the SAT instructor for egelloC. And so if you are going to be going through the SAT program, you're going to be seeing my face a lot. Now, first, for the first section, we're going to be covering Digital SAT 101. So what is the Digital SAT? So the Digital SAT just means you are taking it electronically. So how it used to be is you used to take it by pen and paper, but they've recently changed it to where you are taking it completely electronically and you are using an app called Blue Book, which we will go into in just a little bit. So for the digital SAT, you're taking it for about 2 hours instead of 3, because remember, with electronics, it goes a little bit faster. And there's an adaptive testing format. So what that means is that it adapts to how you answer the questions. So if you are answering every single question correct, then the questions are going to get hard really, really quick. And that's because you're doing so well. So that's what they mean about adaptive. It's adapting to the way that you answer the questions. And then there are shorter reading passages. And then for a calculator, you're able to use a calculator on the entire math section. So the length is about 2 hours and 14 minutes, and this doesn't include breaks. The reading and writing is about 64 minutes total. Now keep in mind, you're not taking that all together, but total, it would be 64 minutes. And then for math, about 70 minutes with 44 questions and then 54 questions for the reading and writing. So each section is divided into 2 equal length modules, and there's a 10-minute break between the reading and writing section and the math section. So a timer in Blue Book is going to let you know how much time is remaining in each part of the test. So what is included in the math section? We have algebra, we have advanced math, we have problem solving and data analysis, and then we have geometry and trigonometry. So these are the 4 sections. I would say the bulk of it is going to be algebra and geometry. Those are going to be the bulk of the questions that you see. Now, as far as trig, you may not see a lot, and that'll be more towards the end of the test. But algebra and geometry is where you want to do the bulk of your studying, because that's where a lot of the questions are going to lie. And then the format is multiple choice with a student produced response. So there are a couple of open-ended answers, and just make sure when it comes to the open-ended answer, there are up to 4 ways that you can answer the question when it comes to math. You don't have to enter all of the ways to answer the questions, you just have to enter one, and if it is the correct answer, you will score points for that answer. Now, as far as the reading and writing section, we have information and ideas, craft and structure, expression of ideas, and standard English conventions. So what is the Blue Book app? This is basically their free digital testing application that allows students to take official practice SATs. So this is where you're allowed to take the practice test, you're able to review your diagnostic scores, and just see how well you're doing and how far you need to go. So my recommendation is that you do download this app, either on a Windows or a Mac device or an iPad, or even if your school gives you a Chromebook, you can download it on there, just to allow yourself to get that practice in. And once you open the app, you're going to see a practice and prepare section right on the home screen. So this is where you choose between a test preview or a full-length practice test. So you have either option to play with. And this is pretty much what it looks like. We have the welcome section. We have the area where you can choose a full-length practice test, and then you have the actual practice test. So you should familiarize yourself once you download it with, how things look. Now, what to bring to the testing center on SAT day? First of all, a fully charged testing device that has Blue Book installed. This is very, very important. And then, of course, your admissions ticket. Make sure it's up to date, acceptable photo ID, pencils and pens for scratch paperwork, an acceptable calculator, a watch without an audible alarm if you wear a watch, a charging cable, just in case your laptop does something where it needs to be charged, a bag or a backpack, drinks, snacks, for your break, and then an EpiPen if that is necessary for you. So just some things to keep in mind on testing day. And then I do want to throw out this resource here. This is what we use in our own egelloC SAT prep. So if you're going to be going through the SAT prep classes, we will be in Magoosh heavily. And Magoosh is one of the #1 trusted sources for SAT prep. So it is very reliable. And we have seen an increase in scores as a result of students going through this program. And just remember, there's over 1,000, there's over 1,700 practice questions. There are video and text explanations for every questions, up to 3 practice tests, and over 200 video lessons. So this is an excellent resource for SAT prep. And they also have live tutors. So if myself is not available or if it's not during office hours, you can feel free to reach out to any tutors, and they will also be able to help you navigate through the different courses and everything that's happening. So now, once you take that practice test, how do you review your diagnostics? Well, #1, you need to analyze your overall performance. So look at not only your total score, but your individual section scores, because this is going to help you know where you need the most practice. And then you're going to compare your target scores to identify whatever areas needing improvement. So let's say you want to score a 1,500 on the SAT and you're probably at a 1,250. So you need to figure out how to bridge that gap. So that's why it's important to know your actual score, like where you are, and then your target score as far as where you want to be. And also identify the strengths that you will continue to build and the weaknesses that you will work on to improve. So how to categorize your mistakes on the SAT. #1, content knowledge gaps. So where are you falling short on the content? Is this a content problem? If it's not a content problem, it may be a time management issue. Are you spending too much time on a certain set of questions versus another set of questions? So those are things to think about, like pacing. And then maybe just careless errors. Maybe you may be just reading certain material too fast or not understanding the questions. So you might be misinterpreting things. So this is very important to keep in mind. So sometimes, especially when you're reviewing your scores, sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking you don't know enough content when it could just very well be your pacing on the content. So that's very important to remember. And then when it comes to reviewing wrong answers, especially if you're going to use Magoosh, just review each correct answer thoroughly and use tutorials that explain in detail the correct solutions. And this is just across the board, where you either in Blue Book or Magoosh or whatever SAT prep resource you are using, you just want to identify those patterns of mistakes and the type of questions that you typically answer incorrectly, because there are always patterns when it comes to the SAT. The SAT is a very predictable exam. And you will find that out if you are going through our program, that the questions are very predictable. So it may be only a specific type of question that you keep getting wrong if it's not a content error. And then you want to identify the types of traps that you typically fall into, and recurring error types. And we're going to get into traps in just a little bit. But in the meantime, you want to set those specific measurable goals for improvement. So developing a study plan, knowing how much time you are going to spend on each section, not only in practice, but on the test. So this is a time test. So you have to be very aware of your pacing when it comes to that. And then as far as like the reports, insights on your strengths and weaknesses that you will get from the Blue Book app, you want to leverage those insights. So what is your score report saying? What is it saying you need to work more on, and where your strengths lies? But keep in mind, we still want to capitalize on our strengths. We don't want to ignore the areas that we're stronger in, because those are where you're going to score the most points. But you still want to look at those weaknesses and look for those areas to improve. And then just overall review your performance on different question types and difficulty levels. So overall, it's just a lot of self-reflection involved and being honest as far as where you are and where you want to be. And just be encouraged. Don't lose heart. This is a very difficult test. So be encouraged, and just keep practicing. The more you practice and the more you incorporate, especially those test-taking strategies, you are going to find a lot of improvement in your answers. So now let's look at SAT Prep 101. We're going to be looking at the big picture. We're going to be trying to understand the SAT, and then common mistakes that lower your scores. And then towards the end, we're just going to be looking at a few test-taking strategies and an introduction to the reading strategies as well. So what to keep in mind is you want to be very well-rounded. You know, don't neglect your grades, your classes, and your rigor in lieu of SAT study. We want to study for the SAT, but we also don't want to neglect everything else we have going on, and we want to be reasonable about our goals. So if you are currently at a 1200 and you're trying to shoot for a 1600, that might be an unrealistic goal at this point. So maybe if you're at a 1200, let's shoot for a 1300. That's a little bit more realistic of a goal, or maybe a 1350 or something like that. And so we want to be very rational when it comes to, okay, this is where I am. Let's try to get here. And then maybe once we're at a 1350, we can shoot for the 1400, and so on and so forth. Now, why does this course matter? Why does this training matter? It matters because the SAT is very hard and stressful. It also differs from traditional and school exams. This is not the typical exam that you're going to be taking. And so understanding how to approach the SAT is going to make all the difference, and it's going to dramatically increase your score if you're able to apply a lot of these lessons. Now, why is the SAT hard? Because it's designed that way. The SAT is designed to be a hard test for a reason. This is a college prep exam. And so, you know, colleges are constantly asking for this score, and it's designed to be hard for a reason. You know, the questions are written to trick you intentionally. And this is why, you know, we encourage a lot of SAT prep, because you're going to have to begin to start thinking through the lens of a test writer. Content knowledge is important, but you also have to understand the other side. The other side is, what is the writer thinking when they wrote this, and how are they trying to trick me? It's very important to kind of incorporate that into your test taking strategies, because the SAT is not like school exams. School exams is most often you're memorizing facts, you may be writing short essays, you kind of have to you're just memorizing what you've learned thus far in that class. The SAT is built a little different. The SAT actually takes strategy more than content knowledge, because the strategy makes all the difference between scoring maybe a 1350 versus a 1400. So just to keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to approaching the SAT, it sounds counterintuitive when I say this, but the SAT does not always require you to know the exact answer to a question or to understand a concept thoroughly. Now, this is not me saying don't study your content. You want to study your content. Your content should be 75% of your study. However, when it comes to taking the SAT, sometimes strategy alone is going to reveal the answer to you in less time than it takes to actually solve the question. And I'm going to give an example. I'm going to give an example in just a minute, but just remember that for the SAT, content knowledge is not always enough. Strategy is going to be very, very important, because that's what causes the dramatic improvement in scoring. Now, why your score may currently be lower, it can be any set of reasons. Only you can determine that, especially based on your diagnostics, but some examples include lack of content knowledge, not reading or understanding the question, maybe rushing through it, or lack of pacing. Those kind of go hand in hand. Impulsive answering. So impulsive answering is a big one, because we often assume what the question is asking instead of looking at what the question is actually asking us. So we want to be very, very, very cautious of that. And then just ignoring important rules and steps, making strategy harder than it actually is. You're going to find that SAT strategy is actually very, very simple. It's not always easy, but it's actually very, very simple. And then, like I said, projecting answers, that goes with impulsive answering. So projecting answers onto a question that may not even be asked of you. Overachieving and overthinking. Overthinking is a huge one. Now, the majority of you are scholars, and that's why you're in this program. But overthinking is huge when it comes to the SAT. Do not overthink this test. Once you understand the strategy, you understand the SAT. So now let's look at those strategies. First, some common strategies for SAT success. We're gonna look at the most common strategies that make all the difference in scoring. Number one, read the questions first. It does not matter whether you are in a math or reading section. You want to read the question and you want to understand what the question is asking. Because once you understand the question, you either know how to solve the equation if you're in a math section, or you know how to approach the passage if you are in a reading section. So the question is very, very important when it comes to SAT strategy. It's very tempting to just read the question, read the equation or read the passage. You don't want to do that first. You want to read the question because it will show you what you are looking for when it comes to approaching any type of problem. And then determining the question type. So what type of question is being asked in math? Are they asking you for an equation? Are they asking you for a solution? That matters because if it's asking you for a solution, then you know you're going to be solving. But if it's asking you for an equation, you're not going to be solving anything. So determining the question type is very, very important in understanding how to approach that particular problem. And then efficiency and effectiveness. So when it comes to efficiency and effectiveness, sometimes traditional methods can be time consuming, and it just takes away valuable time that you need for other harder questions. So remember, the goal is to score correctly no matter how you arrive at the correct score. And this is very important because sometimes, especially on algebra, we just want to sit there and we just want to solve for everything. We want to solve for X. When sometimes strategy actually will work way better than sitting there spending 5 minutes on an algebraic equation when you could just incorporate SAT strategy and get it in less than 15 seconds. So this is why strategy is important when it comes to efficiency and effectiveness. It's not about how you arrive at the answer, it's that you arrived at the answer, if that makes sense. And just easy comes first. Always focus on the easy questions first and then go back and focus on the harder ones. And this kind of plays into pacing because sometimes we want to beat the time. Sometimes we just want to rush through. We want to beat the time when it comes to SAT strategy, but that leads to a lot of careless mistakes. And so what you want to do, although it may sound counterintuitive, you want to pace yourself. You want to actually go a little slower so that number one, you understand the question, but number two, you're able to identify where the writer is trying to trick you, where the test is trying to trick you. So that's why you want to focus on your pacing. And just remember, mark for review is your best friend. There is a section of the SAT where you can mark a question for review, skip it, and then come back at the end when you finished all the questions and you have that little bit of time left. Then you can go to your marker for review and review those extra questions that you skipped and just either make educated guess or just begin to solve for those. And then, of course, looking for wrong answers and process of elimination. And I want to highlight this because process of elimination can save you so much time on the SAT. Once you understand the question and the question type being asked of you, it becomes so much easier to spot answers that are obviously wrong. And wrong answers tend to be easier to spot than right ones. So I wanted to provide you with an example just so that you can see what I'm talking about. So we have an example. What is the capital of the country Liechtenstein? Now, the majority of us have probably never heard of this country before in our lives, okay? We have never heard of this unless you are a well-traveled individual, then kudos to you. But the majority of us don't even know where this is on a map probably. But if this were a question on the SAT test, we could actually determine the answer without any prior knowledge of this country or its capital. So, using process of elimination, does somebody help me in the chat? What answers can we get rid of immediately? When it comes to the capital of the country, Liechtenstein, what can we get rid of? Somebody tell me in the chat. A and D, so Washington, D.C. and London, we know that those are not. Though Washington, D.C. is in the United States and London is in the UK. So that leaves us with B and C. So out of B and C, right, B is California's capital. So we just use process of elimination to determine that the answer is C. So this is a very important skill to incorporate on the SAT, because when it comes to even math, even the math section, I know this is probably a facts section, but when it comes to math, a lot of you, or the majority of you, are extremely well in math. So you can tell when you're reading maybe an expression or something like that, you can tell when a number is a little too high or a little too low. You can get rid of those answers. Trust your instincts when it comes to that, because that is what saves you time on the SAT. So process of elimination is one of the best tools out there when it comes to determining what answers are obviously wrong, and that will leave you with maybe two good answers that can be, and you actually have a 50-50 chance of guessing correctly. So I just wanted to point that out. So of course the answer is C. And like I said, in both math and reading, there's just going to be answers that always stand out because they're obviously wrong. Do not second guess yourself. Like I said, overthinking becomes a major problem on the SAT. So do not second guess yourself. Trust your instincts when something looks blatantly wrong, because 99.99% of the time it is wrong. So just wanted to point that out there. So we're talking about pacing, just avoiding careless mistakes. And on the reading, this is especially on the reading, you want to annotate, annotate, annotate. So you have the option on the digital test to annotate by highlighting the test. And then this option that says annotate, this button will pop up where you can add notes to your highlighted text. This is a very useful tool for the reading section of the SAT. This will be saved, so all of your annotations are saved. And so if you want to annotate, mark for review, and then come back, you can actually do that. So even if you move to different questions and you want to come back later, all of your annotations are saved in the text. So just wanted to throw that out there. In the math section, you will be given scratch paper, so you always have the option to, write out your problems. And then when all else fails and you've used process of elimination, just guess. Especially, I would say use process of elimination first, and then once you've gotten down to maybe your last two answers, I would just make the most educated guess, especially if you are running out of time. Remember, you do not lose points for scoring incorrectly. So you never want to leave an answer blank. Because if you leave it blank, you're actually sacrificing some potential scored points on something you could have gotten right. And so when all else fails, just put something down. You can never go wrong just putting something down. And then just some math specific strategies. When it comes to math, the strategies are a little bit unique because we're dealing with numbers. So the first one would be proximity. Some answers you'll be able to get rid of, like I said, because they don't fall within the proximity of where you know the correct answer is going to be. So this also happens in a lot when it comes to geometry, and you're dealing with angles and things like that. So you know that a straight line is always going to be 180 degrees, or a circle is going to be 360. So things like that. So knowing the rules helps you know, okay, so if I total these two angles, I'm looking for an answer between this number and this number. That way, you can eliminate any answers that fall outside of that number. So this is how the tool of proximity works. Knowing where you kind of want the answer to be, or where you know the answer will be, you may not know the complete answer, but you can definitely get rid of some answer choices just by knowing the ballpark area where the answer is going to lie. And in some cases, you'd be able to get rid of all of the wrong answers that way, if that makes sense. And then reading the actual question, because math, I can tell you right now, is designed to trick you, because a lot of the questions, it's very easy to assume what the question is asking versus what the question actually wants you to do. And so it's very important to understand that when you see numbers and equations, it's going to be tempting to assume what you know the question is asking without reading the question. Just make sure you read the final question so that you know you know what it's actually asking, and it improves your chances of scoring correctly. And then chunking, this is where we talk about breaking a problem down or a concept down into bite-sized pieces just to make it easier to digest. So this applies to problems that require multiple steps to solve, especially like the word problems you'll find. The word problems that will ask you to write out an expression is going to require chunking because it's going to give you so much information that you're going to have to write that equation step by step. And then letting the answers guide you. Number one is read the question. Number two, read the answer choices. So reading the answer choices, that's how you know what you're going to do. If the question is asking for the function of something and then the answer choices have straight numbers, then we know we are going to be solving for that function. But if the question is asking for an expression, which expression, most identifies with such and such, we're not going to be solving for anything, especially if the answer choices has nothing but expressions in it, then we're not going to be solving. So the answer is showing us that we don't have to solve for anything. We're just looking to figure out the best expression for something and then plugging in the answers. So with some questions where you have to solve an equation, the easiest way to arrive at the correct answer is simply to plug them into your calculator. So don't underestimate the power of plugging in the answer. If you have 4 different answers for A, B, C, and D, simply plugging in each answer into the expression in that given question will yield the correct answer that you want. And this normally happens in less than 30 seconds so that you can move on to a more difficult question. And then, of course, process of elimination. I cannot stress this enough. This is probably the most important tool that you will need for SAT prep. Now, let's look at approaching the reading passages. So our approach where in our SAT program where we practice approaching the reading questions, these are the steps that we use. Number one, we read the question. Number two, we identify the question type. Step three, we read the passage. Step four, we highlight what can help and annotate if needed. And then step five, of course, process of elimination. So when it comes to step one, we use active reading. So active reading of the question helps us understand what we're looking for. So if the question is asking about a vocabulary word, we know that we're going to be using context clues in the passage to look for the best definition of that word. But if the question is asking for purpose, then we're going to be looking at the entirety of the passage to figure out why the author wrote this. So if you see where I'm going, the question really guides our thinking in terms of approaching the passages. And then, of course, identifying the question type. This shows how you approach and answer the question. And then, of course, reading the passage. So we read the passage with the question in mind because we now know what we're looking for. And then we annotate. So as we're reading, if we're reading for purpose, as we're reading, when we come across certain things that allow us to understand why the author wrote it, we're going to highlight it and we're going to annotate. We're going to say, okay, so the author wrote this because yada, 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 So understanding the question type and the question itself is going to guide our annotations as well. And of course, process of elimination, getting rid of those obviously wrong answers so that we can score correctly. So our question categories are vocabulary, of course, reading comprehension, understanding what you've read, rules. These tend to ask questions along the lines of which of the following completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English. So we're dealing with punctuation, things like that. So rules, we're dealing with the rules of standard English. And then transitions, these are answers that only have transition words and ask questions along the lines of which choice completes the text with the most logical transition. So you will see those exact words. And then rhetorical synthesis, sorry. This requires you to integrate multiple pieces of information in order to craft a coherent response that aligns with a specific objective. In a nutshell, this means that the questions that are being asked along the lines of what would you infer from, what would happen if you combined, what solutions would you suggest for? You will see this exact wording on the SAT. So it's pretty predictable. It's nothing new. What you see in italics is the types of questions that you will see on the SAT. And if you see this type of question, then you know the respective category it's in. Now, let's look at identifying trap questions and answers. Just to reiterate, if you do have a question, please leave it in the chat. I will be getting to questions towards the end of the seminar, towards the end of the workshop. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat and I will start answering them once the presentation is over. Now, when it comes to identifying trap questions and answers, there are a lot of different types of trap questions that especially fall into the reading section, because the trick is to, the goal is to trick you. So just wanted to let you know. But if you are practicing, you are able to identify those types of trap questions and answers. So the first would be contradictory language. And this is when the question or the answer choice, expresses a tone, a perspective, a meaning, or a central idea opposite of the author's intent. So if the author is, expressing happiness in a passage, and you see an answer choice that expresses sadness, then we know that that's kind of contradictory language. I'm using basic language, but that's kind of the idea. If you're looking at kind of like the tone or the perspective of the author, and then an answer choice looks the complete opposite, we know that that's a contradictory answer. And then there's opinionated language. This is a huge one. This expresses an opinion or a perspective rather than objective fact or evidence from the text. So it would be an answer choice that says, most people do such and such. That is opinionated language because we don't have the data to confirm that most people do such and such. Or they can say something like, the author is obviously looking to do such as we don't know that information. So if it's information that we can't verify, that is opinionated language, especially if it is expressing something that lacks evidence or objective fact. So that is something to keep in mind. And the language that you'll often see is like most people, or all group of population do such and such, something like that. It's like these generalizations that are not rooted in fact. And then of course, borrowed or repetitive language. This can be a difficult one, I'll be very honest, because these answers seem correct because they borrow language from the passage to kind of form this incoherent response that kind of looks coherent, but it's not. And the phrase is used incorrectly, or it answers a question that's not being asked. But the trick in this, and if you're going through SAT prep, you see a lot of this because we practice this a lot, but the SAT is saturated, especially the reading section. It is saturated with borrowed and repetitive language because those answers do look correct. Now, that is the part where you can second guess yourself, because if it is using language from the text, if it is just using straight language from the passage, assume that answer is wrong and it's trying to trick you, because 99% of the time it is. Usually, the correct answer will never borrow language. It will always express the correct answer in a different way. That's not necessarily the wording that's used in the passage, but it is the correct answer. And this is a very important SAT strategy to use. So if you see a lot of language from the passage, that answer is wrong most of the time. It is a trick. It is a trick answer using borrowed or repetitive language. And then there are answers that are outside the written scope. So they may be correct in nature, but they more so rely on assumptions or reasoning outside the scope of the written text, and they don't really have the evidence from the text to support the answer. And then answering non-existent questions. So sometimes the answer choice will have correct information from the passage in it. However, it's not answering the question that is actually being asked. So you actually have to watch out for that as well. In addition to borrowed or repetitive language, there are also facts in the answer choices that you'll see, but it's not actually answering the question. And then there's those partially correct answers where it's either only answering part of a question, so part of the answer is right, and then part of the answer is the other part of the answer is either an assumption, or it could just be flat out wrong because it doesn't have evidence. or it only may be partially correct and partially incorrect. So you want to watch out for that as well, because there are some answers that are kind of half true, but the other half is a little iffy. And if you feel that way, if it's a little iffy, then you can assume that that answer is wrong, because the correct answer is almost always going to not only not use borrowed or repetitive language, but it's going to be very, very clear. And it is going to be very clear from the passage. But this is why I cannot state enough that step 4 is very important when it comes to answering the questions, because your annotations, once you finish annotating, you are going to have an idea of what the correct answer is based on what the question is, based on reading the question, and based on your annotations, because like I said, your question guides your annotations. So knowing what to look for is what you're annotating. You're annotating exactly what you're looking for. And that is going to help you, especially fight against these trap questions and answers that are, that are there to try to trick you. So this concludes our workshop, and I'm going to get to the questions. I know this was really fast, but we were a little short on time. But if you are interested in the SAT prep program, definitely talk to the CX team, and we can see about, taking some next steps. But just know that we go into a lot more depth in our SAT prep, just so that you can see these things in real time and know what they look like. Now, our first question from the chat is SAT prep course included in the basic coaching family package, or a separate fee will be charged? It is included, and I believe I will get the correct answer. I don't remember if Coach Art is still on this chat, still on this presentation, but from my belief, it is for the students of the blue. If you're in the Blueprint program, you can automatically sign up. So if you are a Blueprint student, you can sign up, and it is no additional charge. When will you get the presentation link? I do believe that is, let me see. So the presentation link, so I will, once that answer is revealed in the next couple of minutes, I will be able to convey that information. For those who joined the late, will the slides be emailed? That is also a good question. Let me see. Okay. Oh, I can stop sharing. That'll help. Okay, there we are. Go ahead, and you can continue to ask questions if you have them. We still have a little bit of time. If you're asking about the presentation and the slides, give me like 2 minutes to get that to you, to get that information to you. But if you have any other questions regarding the presentation itself, like anything that was discussed, feel free to ask. Okay, so I just received the answer. The presentation will be posted to YouTube in about a week. So you will get that link in about a week. So do I have any other questions? Okay, so when it comes to the slides, I don't know if we provide the slides. So we will find that out for sure. If you, who asked the question about the slides? Chris, if you are in Discord, what I would do, I would actually ask that question in Discord because that is a Tony question. So we will have to get that answer to you later. But what I do know is the slides, I'm sorry, the presentation will definitely be the link to the presentation will definitely be uploaded on YouTube. So you will have the presentation. As far as the slides, we have to see about that. So Chris, my recommendation is to ask the question in Discord so that we can have the person who handles that get you that answer. And do I help prepare ACT? Yes, I do. Now, keep in mind, my SAT strategies and my ACT strategies tend to run into each other. And so if you plan on taking the ACT test, then the strategies are going to do the same exact thing in terms of helping you increase your score. Because what we find is the test takers, the test writers tend to all do the same thing in terms of trapping you with questions and things like that. So yes, you will, if you decide that you want to take the ACT, yes, we will enroll you in the SAT program, which is being revamped to include both SAT and ACT, and you will be well prepared for that as well. Do you help students try to see which one is better? Technically, yes, but that also happens in your coaching. So your assigned coach is going to also help navigate that for you. But if you come to SAT office hours, I would be glad to help you with that as well. And if you're going through SAT prep, then our office hours are Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm there every Wednesday. You can just pop in and we can definitely hash that out. So if you're unsure which one you want to take, I can definitely help you with that. Now, which book would I recommend for the SAT? There are some good ones out there. I would say Kaplan and Princeton Review are really good. To be honest, they have never led anyone I know astray. But I can't. What I would say is Magoosh is top tier. So even the SAT prep books are good. Don't get me wrong, but top tier from what I've seen, because you got 400 lessons, 1,700 practice questions. Magoosh is going to be top tier when it comes to SAT prep. So, and just keep in mind, if you are going through our SAT prep program, we help you navigate through all of that. And not only do you get Magoosh, you get the weekly lessons from me, you get weekly drills, and you get feedback, and you get office hours. So you can come in anytime you want and get the help you need. So it is a very well-rounded program that is meant to over prepare you for the SAT, if that makes sense. Now, do I have any other questions? We still got some time. Oh, okay. I think Linda. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just now seeing your question. How much prep should students do before a baseline practice test? We always recommend 7 to 8 weeks. Um, we always recommend weeks in advance because it takes time to really get to know the test. It really does take time. And so it really does take time. I can't stress that enough. So I would say 7 to 8 weeks tops, if I'm being very honest. Um, and and I say this because what we've seen in our SAT program is that the strategies don't come right away. You have to practice and practice and practice. So that would definitely be my recommendation. Let me see. Were there any questions that I missed? I don't see any other questions. Linda, let me see. Oh, you said you asked the same question. Okay. So when do I recommend you take the SAT for the first time? Like junior year? I would say your junior year, to be honest, because you're able to take it up to 6 times. Now, let me say this, you do not want to take the SAT 6 times, but you are able to. But the reason why I say don't, and every other coach in egelloC is going to tell you the same thing, is because it kind of starts to look bad after the third try, where it's like, okay, can this person just probably can't do well on this test or something. So I would say 3 times tops, but um, but I do recommend you start in your junior year, maybe like that September, October, so that you can get a baseline score and then so that you can know where you want to be next. Unless you score perfectly, you may not have to take it again. But I would recommend definitely at the beginning of your junior year in high school because you're able to get a practice score like that August, September, October, and then you're able to, you have like a whole year to retake it and do some SAT prep. Now, how long does the SAT course take? We take, it's technically 8 weeks. It's 7 weeks of test prep, and then that eighth week you take your SAT test. So what we require is that you are registered for the SAT test in whatever month you want to take it. Let's say you want to take it in September. Then if you want to take SAT prep, then our SAT prep will start maybe like late July, early August. So we do intense prep leading up to your SAT test. So you do have to be registered for the SAT in order to be able to go through the SAT program. So how many hours should you be spending a day if you are taking it this August? The recommendation, maybe like 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 to 10 hours per week is ideal. Now we understand you have busy schedules, but the ideal would be like 5 to 10 hours per week if you are going to be taking it very, very soon. So let's say you're enrolled in SAT prep and you're going to be taking SAT next month, then yeah, you do need to be increasing that rigor, increasing that SAT prep time. Are more colleges and universities requiring the SAT or ACT? I would say the SAT is probably the most requested. ACT is, a lot of colleges do request it, but it's not as popular as the SAT. So this is why, we focus on SAT prep, but that doesn't mean we neglect ACT prep if that's what you need. But I would say the SAT is a lot more requested than ACT scores. Do we have any other questions? We got about 5 more minutes. You're welcome, and you're welcome to all of you. If you are interested in SAT prep, definitely talk to your coach or the CX team, and we can definitely see about getting you in a cohort. Especially if you're in the blueprint. If you're in the blueprint program, it's automatically added to your package. So it is definitely something you want to take advantage of. So I don't see any more questions in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and end the presentation. Thank you all. You've been great. Oh, wait, we have one more last minute questions. What percentage of schools are now requiring the test? That's a good question. I don't think I know the answer to that particular question, but your name is Gail Mills. I can definitely get that answer to you. So let me copy that, copy your name, and I will definitely get that answer to you. Okay. So Gail Mills. Oh, I know what to do. Let's see. There we go. Take a screenshot of your name. Okay. And Linda, that is correct. Even if it's not required, it's still good for access to scholarships. So if you're looking for, scholarships or maybe like fellowships, things like that. So yeah, it is definitely still good. And it's just an overall a really good overall program. And it also translates into your core classes. So like your math and reading classes because it teaches a lot of strategies as well. So the The jury's still out. Is it Ananya? We're trying to figure out if y'all will have access to the slides, but you will have access to the presentation for sure. That posts in about 1 week, so I would definitely look out for that. So you'll be provided with the link in about 1 week. Any other questions? We got 2 minutes. Okay, it looks like we're done. So I can go ahead and end the presentation, and I may see some of you in SAT prep. So y'all have a good one.